Welcome back, Roadman. Today we have a special guest who needs no introduction. It's Mr. Alex Dowsett, former World Tour cyclist and world record holder, is here with us today. After an illustrious professional career, Alex has actually continued his journey in the cycling world as an amateur. In today's video, we're going to be diving deep into his experiences and the invaluable lessons he learned from the pro cycling circuit. Alex will share the key insights and strategies that many amateurs overlook. He's now applying them to his amateur cycling. Stay tuned, because my goal today is to help you bridge the gap between amateur and professional with tips straight from one of the best in the business. It's Mr. Alex Dowsett. Alex Dowsett, welcome back to the Roadman podcast.
Thanks for having me again.
Screaming babies in the background doesn't say pro cyclist at an altitude camp.
No, those days are gone, and nor can I say, oh look, I really need my sleep for performance. So Chanel, you got night shift, all right? Doesn't fly anymore.
How are you dealing with retirement?
All right. I'd say this year is actually tougher than last year. Novelty has kind of worn off. It's not new anymore. I'm not saying I miss it. That's the question I probably get the most, is like, do you miss it? And my reply is always like, I don't miss it at all. But there's like little snippets of it I miss.
I was about to say, can you put it into a, like, it is too big to put into a box, isn't it? Do you miss aspects of it?
It as a whole, no. And especially, I think it's getting so much harder now than it was previously. So I'd speak to teammates in the Classics time who say they have been home with kids. They have been home for 2 days since the start of the new year because it's training camps and it's racing. And it's just like, that's I'm happy to, and that's just to like maintain the level. That's just to keep up. It's just to be as good as within the spectrum of the pro peloton as they were. That said, I missed the UAE tour because I just enjoyed, that was a race I really enjoyed. So when that was on, I watched the sort of cut and thrust of the bunch sprints and the lead outs. I was like, I enjoyed being a part of that chaos. And the other thing I missed was I was up in Glasgow with Specialized for the World Championships last year. And being on the other side of the fence and watching how much the general public and industry people kind of idolize the athlete is quite, I don't know if profound's the right word, but I was quite shocked by just how important the athletes were to the World Championships. And maybe it's a stupid thing to say because you're there to crown new world champions, but it does revolve around them. And it's kind of like, wow, I was one of them, and I totally took it for granted when I was there because I was there to do a job, just race as hard as I could. And then I think what really got me was quite humbling. So as they were Specialized in their sort of their venue that they'd kitted out, and they had all of their bikes, and I was in a t-shirt like all of the other Specialized employees there, same t-shirt. Someone came up to me in the middle of the time trial worlds whilst we were watching Josh Tarling podium. Came up to ask me about the specs on a commuting e-bike. It's up on show. And I was like, I don't know how to say this without being a dick. I've got no idea because that's not really my job here, even though I'm wearing the right t-shirt that says it should be. And for me, I was just like, wow, that's just at the point where I'm getting this realization that actually when I was a racer, like it was a bigger deal than I gave it credit for.
But isn't it also humbling? Because, on the one hand, you're talking about when you're at the Worlds, these athletes are idolized. But there's another zone just outside that when you step out of the cycling bubble, you must also realize that a large part of the population, they just don't know. When you're in that world, it feels like that world, that small, tiny little altitude camps, classics into the Grand Tour season, it feels like that's the entire world. And then you take a step to the side and you're like, actually, it's only a very, very small, nerdy percentage of the population care about any of that.
Yes. Yeah. And it's interesting. It's a question that if we go around just sort of some friends that have nothing to do with cycling, and cycling comes up, like, what do you do? I was a cyclist. And the kind of the question, are you famous? And I'm like, no. I say, but in a very small niche circle, a little bit. A little bit. So that's the, So, but with the, like, do you miss it? I miss that hour of being the time trialist for Great Britain in the World Time Trial Championships, but I also don't miss everything it takes to get to that start line.
Have you had time to kind of parse your different identities? So for a long time, maybe it's Chanel, you're Alex the husband, Alex the father, but a large part of your identity was, I'm Alex the pro cyclist. And then with literally a changing on the calendar, one day you're a pro cyclist, the next day you're not a pro cyclist. How have you managed to deal with that loss of identity?
It's kind of because I've carried on racing. That's been a tough one because I'm sort of sit in the eyes of someone else and going, is that Alex just trying to hang on to what he was, or is he racing? I mean, I race for the fun of it, but there are times when I'll get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, go to a National B, take an absolute belting by a bunch of youngsters, drive home, having sort of missed the morning with my kids, wondering why I've done it. And my remit at the moment is I have sponsors that kind of want to be represented, and content creation is a large part of my sort of role at the moment. So there is always purpose to going to these things. But I am, which is why I sort of said this year's been a bit tougher than last year. I was kind of wondering, also, I'm happy doing this now, but what am I going to be doing in 5 or 10 years' time? And it's probably not going to National Bs to take a belting by a bunch of youngsters at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's, so I think, the identity thing is, I had to fill out a car insurance thing the other day. It's like putting your occupation, and that took me a while because I guess kind of nice of my mate, I don't know what that is. So I just put consultant.
Covers that really good.
I think that's what I do. And I think that's the direction that I'm taking. And that started to become the identity. Well, the one thing I really enjoyed, aside from racing and doing well in bike races, was helping other people go faster. And my teammates, when I was my last year at Israel Premier Tech, back when I think they've got their shit together now, it seems they're actually doing pretty well. But back then it was quite chaotic. Everyone got time trial bike, but there was no efforts made to make everyone fit on the time trial bike. So during team cap, I just went massage and said, if anyone wants a bike fit, let me know. And half the team came and saw me for a TT bike fit. And a lot of them, you had like Greipel, who was hilarious because you can't do much with those shoulders. But yeah, Tom Van Ashbrook just transformed him on the bike. And then he messaged me a couple of weeks later. He's like, mate, I've never been able to do 400 watts on a time trial bike. And now I can do it without thinking. And I feel like I look 10 times more aerodynamic. And I get quite a big kick out of that. So I think that's the direction, is trying to, not necessarily a bike fitter, but just a consultant of speed.
I think it's always interesting when you get to observe the kind of two different worlds. You, in a short space of time, going from racing in the World Tour to racing, Sunday races, the exact same as I am. What are you guys doing in the World Tour? What was done in the World Tour that you take for granted and you do it automatic, that you move across to the Sunday races and you're like, oh, I can't believe no one is doing that. It's just, I'd done that without even ever thinking.
I think of foreseeing potential crashes before they happen. That's one.
It's like a sixth sense. What's the, like, what is it? Is it a smell in the air? Is it a couple of lockups beforehand?
I think it's always like a crash is never, no one wants to crash, right? No one go, and I don't think anyone wants to crash someone else either. And a crash generally doesn't happen when one person hits another. It's when a combination of factors manifest and result is someone has nowhere to go except for the floor. And yeah, that happened in a Portsdown Classic. It used to be a Purves, now it's a Portsdown Classic. And I remember I sat in a bunch, and it was one of those openings where a load of people are just following through to get into the air to attack before the gap closed. And one guy went through, and as he went through, I was like, I remember thinking, you're brave. You're really brave to be going through that. Kind of the last person through was the one ahead of you, really. And he went through, and at the same time, the fellow who was kind of being chopped was also being squeezed from the other side, and he ended up touching this guy's wheel, going down right in front of me, literally at my feet. And carnage ensued in front of me. Carnage ensued behind me as well. Someone ran into the back of me and a load of other people. And I just came to a stop, popped my foot down, kind of meandered through the melee, and then carried on the race. And there's 360 degrees of bodies on the floor. And then I was just stood in the middle of it. And afterwards I said, that was lucky. But then because I had GoPros running front and rear, which I can do now, I kind of I overlaid speed and everything. And I was starting to slow down before, just as this rider was going through the gap, that I was like the brave gap.
You're anticipating this is going to go bad.
Yeah. So I'm already slowing down, which is why I got hit from behind, and chaos happened behind me. But also I was also slowing it down before these guys were. And then I think they're knowing how to brake properly. So that was one of the biggest things I realized, is that you just kind of see, because you've been in so many of these scenarios where crashes have happened or they've nearly happened, you react to them. It's pure instinct. Did not think for a second I should start slowing down, I should brake. It was just, it kind of surprised me that I was already slowing down.
Dan Martin was talking about crashes are like, when you're on a bad run, you're just magnetized to them. There's almost some sort of cosmic power that pulls you into them. Whereas when you're on a good run, you just seem to avoid them. Like, you'll go through a pile, you'll close your eyes and you'll just come out the other side and go, how did that happen?
Yeah, he's right. I think, I think disc brakes have helped. I think people's ability to stop is greater. So I think there's less. I wouldn't say there's less crashes, but certainly from my own point of view, I'm able to avoid. It's like crashes happen in front of me, and then I just stop the bike. I'm like, I thought I would have been into that. So yeah, I think that's maybe. I mean, obviously we've all gone bigger tires, reduced tire pressure. So you'd argue there's a little more grip.
Less of the slide out crashes going on as well.
Yeah, but then are we going down hills faster because the limit of grip is higher? Yeah, you watch someone like Pidcock descending on that outdoors stage, and everyone's going to watch him. And that descent was a large part of his, well, arguably, the catalyst that helped him win that stage of the Tour. So everyone's going to go, okay, I need to work on my descending, because that is now a marginal gain for winning a push bike race.
Just seems like a bad thing to be trying to win a race on. Like, the risk to reward just doesn't seem like it stacks up that well to win a B race.
Yeah. It's wait, do you mean for me for everyone to be pushing limits. Or
Yeah,
for,
for everyone to be looking at it and going, like, the place where I'm going to attack today on this 100-mile circuit in my amateur race, I'm going to take a little bit more risk on the descent. It just seems like, there's probably better ways you could figure out how to gain an advantage than just risking more than everyone else.
I mean, yeah, I agree with that. The other big risk thing that we have in the UK with racing is the fact that we're racing on half closed roads, so the oncoming traffic on the other side. That's taken some getting used to, and that being like I was saying to a conversation on the weekend, he was asking what the differences I've noticed between pro racing and this racing with the respect for the half closed road. I said it's the fact that it's like a soft border. It's not a hard border like the edge of the road where you cannot go there. If you've got someone who's slightly over on the other side of the white lines, they're a bit unpredictable when they're going to come back onto the correct side of the road.
What I don't get is, because we have the exact same in Ireland, what I don't get is why it's not a hard border. The first time I went out and raced in the US or Canada, I got disqualified. It's an absolute hard border, no warnings. If you put 1 millimeter across it, commissar just comes up on a motorbike, touches you on the shoulders like, you're done, mate. So it's so unthinkable. People look at it like it's the edge of a cliff. Like, there's literally guys trying to counterbalance to not go 1 mil over it, because it's just, there's no discretion. If you're 1 mil over, regardless of how you got there, like, I can come up beside you, go, Alex is a favourite for the race, ride beside you, give you a little nudge on the hip. He's on the far side of the white line. He's gone. But we don't do that in Ireland and the UK. It seems to be this bizarre, if you want to move up, you just, who's going to brake later for the oncoming car and dip back in.
Yeah, not fab. But some of the races, or the lanes that we're racing on, I'm not quite sure how it's a very tenuous, like, faded white line in the middle. I'd say probably the US roads are significantly wider than they are in the UK. Especially some of the little lanes, you end up squeezing around cars. It's one of those things. It is dangerous when you look at it, and certainly some of the YouTube, I've seen the comments on the YouTube, I don't know how you do it, it's so dangerous, but there's no surprisingly few incidents. And that whole danger thing, you don't want to wait for a big incident to decide that something is dangerous.
Yeah.
But it's been like that for a long, long time in the UK. And there's been very, very little in the way of car-related injuries from what I can remember.
What success look like for you with the new amateur racing pursuit? Like, you've always been very goal-orientated, where it's targeting Commonwealths or Grand Tour stages or national championships. Can you set goals around this, or are you trying to be more chill? Definitely
more chill. I think there's only really one goal, and that's a CTT, so Cycling Time Trials national title. I grew up, that's how I entered the sport. That's what I grew up idolizing. Michael Hutchinson, Stuart Dangerfield. Yeah. And what they did in 10s and 25s and the nationals. So and honestly hoping one day that I could be good enough to be competing to win a national 10 or a national 25. And then the kind of sort of got picked up by British Cycling, and the pro thing happened. And always, every year I'd look and see if the national 10 lined up with my calendar. It never did. Never did. And the one time it did, I'd come back and I came back in 2020 and ran fifth in the fifth in the national 25, having just finished ninth in the world championships. And I did. World champs took 30-minute race at average 395 watts for a pretty, very, very mediocre ride. No, it wasn't a good ride. And then national 25, I did 425 watts for 46 minutes and finished fifth. It was Archibald, Bigham, or fourth. Archibald, Bigham, Chris Fennell, and me. World champs, I was on a shift. The national 25 was on a factor slick.
Shift faster.
I think, yeah, and you know, I love my shift, but I think it was more to do with how slow the factor slick was than the how quick the Specialized was. The old. I'm glad Factor built a new time trial bike because the old one was not great.
What's your number drop off been like? I know you're putting a lot of time in on the Wattbike. Are your 1 minute, 5 minute, 20 minutes, are they looking anywhere close to what they used to be? Hey Roadman, excuse the short interruption. I love riding the bike, but on account of being so busy with the podcast at the moment, I'm now what's called a time crunched rider. I never thought I'd see the day. But I have a tool. I'm using Wattbike to keep myself sharp and on point with specific sessions to maximise that available training time. I have a Wattbike Atom right here in the recording studio beside me, and when I have an hour in between interviews, I jump on. It's removing all the friction points for me. There's no more 10-minute setup, unfolding legs, banging my knees off stuff, getting my hands dirty, the usual connection issues. It just works every single time. The Atom's perfect for virtual racing as well because it has crisp gear changes, it has 1% accuracy, and it has max gradient capability of up to 25%. If you're looking for an indoor trainer, I honestly couldn't recommend this any higher. I've been using a Wattbike since 2013. Honestly, it's the last indoor trainer that you're ever going to need. If you head on over to wattbike.com now and use code ROADMAN10, that's ROADMENTEN, and that's going to get you 10% off your Wattbike.
That's a good question. I avoid testing at all costs because it hurts.
TTs are just a test every time, though.
Yeah, I don't have a power meter on my TT bike.
Ah, really?
Yeah, I don't like the numbers. And just last year, I spent the whole year pacing TTs badly because I would set out at not
what
just
you used to be able to do.
The best version of what I used to be able to do.
470 off the ramp. This feels good. I'm on a great day.
Yeah. And then you get not even 5 minutes in, and you're like, oh no, I'm in trouble now. So I think last year I started the National 100 conservatively at 420 watts.
But there is a moment to TTs for anyone who's just done a TT and you have a power meter where you come off the ramp and the first time you kind of glance down at the power meter, you look at it and it's like 650 or something. And you're like, this doesn't feel that bad. Then you're like, all right, it's settling down at 520. Or actually, this is pretty manageable. You fast forward 45 minutes later, you're holding on to 310 for dear life.
Yeah, I was the first 10 of the year, I was always like, maybe today's the day I can hold 500 for 20 minutes. It isn't. So I have a little, on my Garmin screen, I have a little piece of tape where the power should be, and it says 465 watts because that's the most I ever averaged for a TT, just in marker pen. And it kind of makes me smile during the TT. And then just not knowing, I ride it on feel. And
you have speed on your Garmin?
I have speed, distance, time, maybe gradient. I might have, I can't remember. I just don't really.
I remember David Miller telling me importance of having speed on the Garmin and time trials. He's like, it becomes like your real-time CDA checker where you're like, okay, if I tuck my head a little bit more and my power doesn't move, okay, my speed's gone up 0.1. Good. Let's tuck the thumb, see what happens. Speed's gone up 0.1. Good. He said he was obsessed with that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I'd agree with that because just if you're on the open road, it's changing all the time. Gaps in hedgerows, slight gradient changes. If you haven't got power on there, then you might be subconscious. Whilst you're tucking your head, you might be subconsciously going putting a little bit more power out as well. Yeah, I see it. That's not how I work. I will use speed as a minimum checker on the way back. So I set sort of reference points along the way if it's an out and back. So if I'm doing 60k an hour, say on a stretch of downhill on the way out, at the same point on the way back, I want to be doing kind of 42 as a minimum to get the average of 50. 42 because of offsetting the standing start. That's kind of where I use speed for. But I did a 50 a couple of weeks ago, and I went into it with zero. I was just going to ride around and try and not think about it. And I paced it paced it sublimely. Like, I surprised myself. And even at the end, I checked where I knew, like the last 10 miles, I was like, right, okay, let's wind it up now. And it was it was like 2.5 laps. So there was a lot of sort of Strava segments which were the same. And I was still like, just fractionally slower on my last lap than I was on my first two. And even though I was pushing a bit harder. So I actually paced that very well, even though the relative feeling of pacing was higher at the end than it was at the start.
And are you using any tools to help with planning? Are you using like my windsock, my best bike split, any of this type stuff?
No, neither of. I mean, they are both very good tools. I use Best Bike Split a lot for other people, but for myself, I look at there's a phone app called Epic Ride Weather, where you can just put the GPX file in your phone and it will give you the weather conditions. I'll have a look at that just to see which direction the wind is going, and I guess it's quite old school.
And like, are you losing fitness, do you think, faster than you're able to buy back the aero gains? Because now you're kind of, I suppose, you're equipment agnostic. You don't have to use the slow factor bike anymore. You get to choose whatever bike you want, whatever speed suit you want, whatever tires you want. Are you able to offset those decline in fitness gains by using better equipment and spending more time optimizing for aero? Like, ultimately, do you think you're going to be able to go faster, netting out?
Not sure. I need to. I haven't gone to the Molten 10 this year yet, and I need to. That's my wind tunnel testing ground. I sort of know if I'm doing low 19s around there, then I've managed to offset the fitness loss. If I'm doing mid to long 19s, then no, I haven't. If I do a long 18, then I'm up in terms of buying aero for losing fitness.
The TT scene is fascinating because on the one hand, it seems quite exclusionary that you need to have the 15, 16 grand bike and spend a lot of time wind tunnel. But the British scene seems to be developing now where they've all these different categories where you can Eddie Merckx it, and there seems to be a little bit more of a community developing around it than road racing, which is kind of suffering at the moment.
Yeah. So the CTT introduced the road bike category to help make time trialing more welcoming, less intimidating. And it very much worked. So last year, I mean, road racing suffering, TT has been suffering as well since COVID, I think. Pre-COVID, entries were through the roof for Club 10s, and then people just didn't come back after COVID. They've crept back since. Like, I think Molten 10, there are regularly 40 or 50 people on a Tuesday night doing the Molten 10, yeah. Year after everything opened back up, 8 people. Now 20. So it's come back. And I asked around why did so few people come back, and why is it struggling so much? And there was a few things came up, and I think there is no one reason. I think it's a combination of things. One, the cost of living crisis. I think it's not just bike parts being more expensive, but also entry fees going from
petrol,
like £3.50, £4.50 petrol, getting to and from. Time spent at home, like a lot more people, I guess, having like side hustles and trying to work longer hours. And then, so that was one.
But virtual racing's got to hurt it as well, because if you think back to, when I was getting started cycling in 2010, like, it was totally unthinkable that you would do a session indoors. Turbo trainers were so shocking. Yeah. Remember the one where you didn't take the wheel off and it'd be burning through your tires and you're literally staring at the wall in the shed and all paint cans? Now you can race on the Wattbike, on Zwift, or any of these platforms. A lot of people, aren't at the pointy end of the race like you. They're really looking at, when you unpack it, they're looking to come home with sore legs. That's what they're after. And you can get sore legs on these virtual platforms.
And there's also there is a social aspect to it, isn't it? You are getting after you finish the Zwift race, people message each other like I do, like, good race, like, well done, thanks for doing all the work. that kind of thing. What about those bots that were flying off the front of the start? Or his numbers? I don't think his weight was in right. But all of that chat that I guess happens at the Club 10 also, happens on Zwift. So people get their workout, they get their competitive element to it. There hasn't been half an hour or an hour at either side of getting to an event, getting your bike out of the car, kitting up and doing it. Yeah. So no, I think you're absolutely right. That's had and turbo training, indoor training is just a more pleasant place to be. It was certainly my last year in Andorra. Even if the weather was okay outside, I would seriously consider doing 4 hours on the turbo trainer on Zwift, than watching a movie, than going out by myself on the road, because I just found a movie was more stimulating than like the roads were sometimes. So
you know what's interesting now? I'm not sure how much you've looked into the heat acclimation training, because that again is another possibility. Like I was chatting to some of the team at Core who are developing these heat sensors, and they're saying from their data, the effects are more reliable, predictable, and consistent than altitude exposure if done correctly.
Core probably going to
saying that. That's why I prefaced that at the start, because this is not independent data.
Yes, I mean, I don't have I did heat acclimatization training in Andorra. It's great. It's really.
It looks absolutely. It's like your fan's broken for your indoor session. No one's. How fun is that?
Yeah, but I think there's. I mean, mine seemed worse. I got the Team GB pre-Tokyo protocol for heat training, and that was disgusting. So I had put my turbo trainer in the bathroom, started boiling a kettle, but left the lid on, so the kettle just continuously boiled to get the humidity up to 70-80%. Heater in there, turned the heating on so that the room was up to 32 degrees, was about as hot as I could get it. 32 degrees with that humidity. And then I had to have I didn't have a core sensor, I just had an in-ear thermometer. And she was like, you need to see at least a 1 degree increase in body temperature. And the minute that you're not at 1 degree more, you may as well just stop because you're not doing anything. And I said, and make no efforts to cool yourself down. Like, so warm water in your bottles.
That's rough.
Sit there for an hour and a half. And it would generally be 200, 250 watts to get myself warm. And this is a 2,000 meters elevation to get that change in core body temperature. And then it would take about 150 watts to maintain it. And it was disgusting. It really was. It was, not enjoyable, but an absolute necessity for going to Tokyo, which I didn't go. So,
so time well spent in the bathroom.
All in vain. So I think I probably went to Tora Romandy or something. Right?
You've had a bit of time now and a bit of space to reflect. And last time we chatted, it was quite chaotic. I think you just finished. What are you looking back on now with your career, and you think to yourself, I was pretty proud of that. I done that well. I committed well. I was happy with the outcome.
I think I'm proud that I got approached to do a book by Bloomsbury, they're famous for Harry Potter, amongst other things. They said it probably wouldn't be as big as Harry Potter, but
and it was.
Give it a go. So then that's pretty. First thing is that it's pretty wild that someone like Bloomsbury thinks that what I've achieved is book worthy. Because I think from a pure cycling standpoint, I saw Steve Cummings, obviously Gerrard's done a book, Cab's done a couple of books, Dave Miller, Brad, through me. I'd certainly never dreamed of putting myself in those riders' categories for achievement. But I think combined with the haemophilia was where Bloomsbury saw the book. So that whole process was very cathartic. I had to talk about my whole career from start to finish, a whole career, and what precluded it as well with haemophilia and school. And I think from a pure cycling perspective, I was talking about these like really big moments, like Commonwealth Games in 2014 in Glasgow. And I was talking about it, I was like, it went well, I won it. Rowan Dennis was second and Geraint Thomas was third. But I was there on the podium, sort of like a sea full of people thinking, okay, Olympics next. That's the next natural step for this is the Olympics. This is just part of the journey. This is where actually I should be, top step at the podium or something like this. And you just don't take it in at the time. And then looking back, I'm like, Christ, that was a big event. The Commonwealth Games is a big event. Second place was Rowan Dennis, 2-time world time trial champion. Third place was Geraint Thomas, who's won Tour de France. That's a big deal. And but at the time, I just did not take it in at all.
But I almost wonder, Alex, is it the nature of the person that doesn't take that stuff in? Are they the type of person that's likely to achieve that? Because you're never happy with the previous results that's led you to push on and constantly innovate and constantly improve till you get to this point. So you're never stopping to celebrate any of these mini milestones where I might, win the local C race and I'd be milking it for weeks in the champagne room after it, telling the story to anyone who can listen. You're on to the next. What can I learn from? How can I iterate and improve?
Yeah, I guess so. And I think you find, if you ask any athlete, ask Chris Froome when he eventually retires in about 20 years' time.
Yeah. 5 million a year till then.
Yeah. What he's, if he's happy with his career, a better part of him goes, wish I'd got a fifth Tour de France.
Still might.
He still might.
Highly unlikely. If you're
really, well, yeah, I'd wish him. It'd be great to see. I think
love to see him back at the pointy end.
Exactly. Yeah, I love to see him at the pointy end on the stage. Pidcock won last year, and I think that deserved more recognition than it got because of what he's had to come back from.
I also think there's a weird narrative on social media at the moment. All these armchair critics, and there's pages like, is Froome dropped yet and stuff, and you're like, he's won the Tour de France 4 times. He's one of the greatest living riders, maybe one of the greatest ever riders to cycle a bike. That's like, have some respect. Like,
I was in, I think the year that Geraint won the Tour. So obviously Froome had won the Giro earlier in the year. The year Geraint won the Tour, I did an evening at Look Mum No Hands in London, which I think no longer exists. It's a cycling cafe. And it was packed with people watching one of the Queen stage of the Tour. And Geraint was in the batch, and Tom Dumoulin dropped Chris Froome. And everyone cheered when Froome dropped. And it really upset me because I was just like, but wait. The British guy's dropped, and you're all cheering because the Dutch guy's dropped him. I like Tom. I like Chris. I've got no, when you personally know both of them, your loyalties then start becoming slightly blurred. But no one in here knows Tom Dumoulin or Chris Froome. But you're cheering the British guy who's won it 2 or 3 times previous. You're cheering because he's been dropped now. It's like when someone's so successful, they become a bit. Lewis Hamilton a little bit experiences it now. I think it's people love to
I think
see
maybe
him.
The difference is you do hear the odd story creeping out about how Lewis isn't a super nice lad. I've 1,000 episodes in the podcast chatting to pro cyclists every week. I've never heard someone say a bad word about Froome.
No, he's. Don't get me wrong. He's you don't do what he's done without being ruthless. I think he had that altercation with Nibali was it the Giro, where there was a crash, and I think Tony Martin was involved. That wouldn't be completely surprising. Nibali basically blamed Froome having not seen any of the TV footage, Nibali blamed Froome straight after the race. And instead of saying anything in the press, Froome went straight on the Astana bus. And I've had Nibali by the throat, sat in his armchair, telling him that was not my fault. And
two climbers going at each other. That's box office.
Yeah. Yeah, it's someone said to one of my best mates said to me the other day, all I know about YouTube is once you've done really good at YouTube, you start fighting other YouTubers in boxing.
If you get good enough, you go to Netflix.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, Froome's he's a ruthless winner in that respect. But yeah, he's one of the nicest guys.
Actually, I did hear a bad word about Froome. Greg LeMond was on the podcast, and Greg thought Froome motor doped.
Oh, okay.
Full out said to me, he's like, Froome motor doped. I was like, any evidence of this? He's like, no, none. But I think he motor doped. I was like, right, that's a solid theory.
Okay.
It was
so
bizarre.
I think Froome for me is the original Zwift Academy winner. You've got someone with a phenomenal engine, phenomenal physiology. The team takes and goes, if we can keep this physiological masterpiece on a bicycle, he can win everything there is. And it's like Jay Vine.
Yeah.
Similar Jay, I hope he wouldn't mind me saying his track record for crashing isn't great. But if UAE can deliver him to a point where he can win the race, there's not many people who are better than him. And I think Froome was the original. And I was teammates with him. I saw it with my own eyes. The guy was, it was tough to be teammates with because he was so unpredictable and erratic in his riding. So yeah, he was the original. I remember Kjell Karlström, who was the performance director at Israel, and I was teammates with him back in Team Sky in 2011. They just got power meters for the first time, and Kjell was rooming through me. He said, "Yeah, I tried out this power meter thing," and Kjell's like, "Okay." And Kjell's a very smart Finnish, very smart, very quiet, very dry Finnish expert. He said, "What did you do?" He said, "Well, I did 20 minutes as hard as I could, and it was 450 watts." And Charles said, "What do you weigh?" From 68 kilos. Charles, "That's very good." And Freddie said, "Yeah, I wasn't sure I believed it, so I turned around, went down the hill, and did it again." And Charles like, "You did it twice?" So he was like, "Yeah, that's extremely good." And yeah, I think Team Sky's talent back there was taking that, recognizing that engine, and then going, "Okay, well, we need to get 8 guys back then, 9 riders for a Grand Tour, 8 guys who could chaperone this guy to the bottom of a hill, so then we could just let him go and he'll ride to the top of it faster than everyone else and win the tour."
It seemed like he could do what Brad could do. I talked to some of the 2012 Team Sky team and background team, and they said Brad just put such a strain on the whole Team Sky system because it took so many resources for 2012 to get him to that. Like even in terms of his nutrition, to get him that dialed on his nutrition was such a job. But the sports psychology end of to get him to buy into it and the logistics of actually, you need to eat this now. Ding dong, it's 9 a.m, Brad, here's your breakfast. And it seemed like Brad could only maintain that really for that year at that level. Froome seemed to step into that mantle and be able to just do that year after year after year. The sacrifices didn't seem like sacrifices. Roadman, I know how serious you take your goal setting, whether they're fitness or life-related goals. If you're looking for a powerful ally to support you on this journey, look no further than HUEL. HUEL has become my secret weapon for when I don't have time to prepare a balanced meal. It ensures I get the nutrition I need without sacrificing time or taste. Plus, it stops me from reaching for that takeaway menu. I always throw a bottle into my backpack when I'm heading into the city to work, and it stops me eating junk convenience foods, snacking on croissants and bars of chocolate, because I know they don't support my training goals. It's a handy, nutritious meal on the go, and it's got over 22 grams of protein. HUEL is perfect for athletes that don't have time to cook or prepare food before a training session. It's convenient, nutritious fuel at your fingertips, ensuring you hit your daily fueling needs for that session. HUEL Ready to Drink has 26 essential vitamins and minerals in every single bottle. You're getting a whopping 175 health benefits. Plus, it's made from natural ingredients like topeka, sunflower seed, coconut, and more. The best part, it's the flavours. There's 8 crazy, beautiful flavours. Iced coffee is what's in my backpack right at the moment. You can get HUEL directly to your home. All you got to do is head on over to the HUEL website, huel.com/Roadman.
No, and certainly his time at Israel, even though he probably did far more than he should have done, far more than he needed to. And they said they had a camp in Annecy before the tour. They're doing big 6-7 hour days, and then Froome's lumping an hour on before and an hour afterwards as well. He's sometimes clocking up 10-hour days and thinking nothing of it. Yeah. They're thinking nothing of it. And they said no one on the team worked harder than Froome did. So yeah, it's a bit. I don't know. I think it's to then say, I've got no reason, but I reckon he most out. With completely, what was the word you? Completely baseless opinion. It perhaps is. Everyone's going to have opinions. It's. I think seeing what I've seen as his teammate twice at the start and the end of, nearly it. Who knows when the end of Chris Froome's cycling career is going to be? But two sort of eras of it. No, I think Froome's legit.
But it's kind of what makes cycling fascinating, isn't it? You can't have like dominance like Pogacar or Jonas without the question marks starting to come. It's like the success almost seems to come with the question marks. Like I was surprised at the new Netflix Unchained documentary. They leaned so heavily into that is Jonas a doper story, because I hadn't seen that in the media too much, at least the English-speaking media. It was obviously bigger in the French-speaking media. They leaned into it so much for the story.
It's such a shame. It's such a shame that becomes the story, because it's so synonymous with cycling. And I think it's just really, so I've done a lot of speaking. I book tour, basically. I go around with Michael Hutchinson and talk about cycling and my book and Michael and myself. And that question comes up a lot is are these top boys clean? And I always talk about the testing, the whereabouts testing that we have to go through. And I think that comes as a shock to a lot of people. So I say since the age of 18 up until I retired, I had to tell 3 different governing bodies on the same app or desktop, 3 different governing bodies where I slept, the exact address of where I slept every single night, 365 days a year. I had to tell them where I would be, and I would have to be there for an hour of every single day. But what was that? 17 years, 365 days a year. And they'd come for a rider like me who was mid-pack world tour, perhaps. They'd come test me completely unannounced monthly. And I would, and then you step it up a level. I know Pogacar said they've come tested in first thing in the morning, and then they've come again in the evening. And he's like, you were here this morning. And they said, yeah, but it's like, we need it to not be predictable, because, so from my perspective, the rider in my level, I knew if they came, say if they'd arrived this morning, I know I've got about a month until I see them again, give or take. And give or take quite a bit. Could be 3 weeks, could be 6 weeks. But that's a rider of my level. And then suddenly if I start performing much better, they're going to come and test more.
It needs to be unpredictable. It needs to be like Dan Martin's late attack. He said his unpredictable late attack got too predictable near the end of his career, he said.
Yeah. And then, so I think from that standpoint, I've no idea how anyone would cheat the system in that way. And when Pogacar Pogacar and Remco were both sensational juniors, kids. There was all the stories that were right from the start. just being very good. And if you can track that, it becomes less of a surprise. I just think it's a shame that's the story, though, because until you've actually until there's anything, it's baseless, isn't it? Just like, oh, these guys are winning. Maybe they're cheating. It's like, well, nobody says that about whoever's going to win Euro football championships that are on at the moment. If Italy win, you go, wow, but are they taking drugs? It's like no one. Yeah, it's just not a question that comes up.
I think it's more because it's from the outside, cycling isn't viewed as a skill sport. So there's more incentive to, if you bump your endurance, you bump your performance. Where I think in football, when it's a little bit more multifaceted, obviously when you're in the bunch, we all know, because I chatted to Matt Beers on the podcast, the gravel rider, and he's doing 510 watts for 20 minutes. And UAE let him go as a stagiaire. He said he just couldn't position. He said he would have needed to do 710 watts for 20 minutes to get to the front of the bunch because he just couldn't get near it. He said he'd get to the front and he'd immediately be back the back of the bunch. And he just couldn't figure out how to hold position. So there is more of a skill element than people realize. But I think the outside media or your average Joe with that doping question often sees it as a straight out endurance sport. If you have a high threshold, you will win races. It's just not true. Maybe Pogacar has the best threshold in the bunch, but he's also arriving at the base of the climb, fourth wheel. Valverde was like a decade in the top three. You're like, how does he keep popping up in the final in Liège, just in that spot? It's skill.
Yeah, and that is skill. It was interesting where we're talking about all the Mitch Docker summed it up. He's like all these crashes, these youngsters that are not doing the. I thought that was a good point from him. I don't know if it's the be all and end all, but I thought it was a good point, saying there perhaps needs to be a certain level of experience bike racers need to have before entering World Tour races, because that skill. Nathan Haas at the Gralong recently said, because he joined the World Tour from mountain biking, so he was very out of his depth in the bunch, and his team, which I think was Slipstream at the time, rented him a house in Belgium for 6 weeks and said, you're going to go race 3 Comesses a week for 6 weeks. So what are you going to do? And then you're going to come back. And he says, I came back a bike racer. I went there like a guy who had an engine, and I came back a bike racer. So I think you're completely right. The art of butt positioning, racing a bike is missed quite a bit.
Because I'm not saying the French get everything right, because they definitely get a lot wrong. But when I moved over to France as an amateur, I just kept hearing le métier, like the apprenticeship. And for them, the apprenticeship, it wasn't about power figures. It was about just this. I got laughed at for wearing a helmet out training because they thought like, oh, Mr. Safety wearing a helmet. It's hilarious. Yeah. For them, it was just about the craft of becoming a pro cyclist. And that's just so multifaceted. Like, can you be pinned against a curb that's 1 foot high, and can you bunny hop onto that from there? Can you, bounce shoulders going around corners? Can you? They just look at cycling through a different lens, and we look at it going, "Oh, what's your watts per kg?"
I think that does exist in all the way up as well. Physiological testing at one team, and Rory Sutherland at Israel, and we just joined. And Rory Sutherland was told that him and I, physiologically, were the worst 2 riders on the team. And the testing consisted of a wrap test on rollers, and how high you could hop on one spot, how high you could hop, how high you could jump, some flexibility stuff. And it wasn't an accusation. It was just like, oh, according to this, you and Alex are the 2 worst riders on the team. And Rory's like, wise old Rory was like, well, interesting, because you've got me, I've just ridden basically the whole world to either first or second wheel for Quintana and Movistar, the whole thing, which hopping on one spot can't really tell you how well you can ride the front for 3 weeks. And then you got Alex, who's just finished 5th in the Worlds, which is arguably the most competitive FTP test there is on the planet. So, which also you can't really tell from hopping on one spot. And they were completely receptive to that. But it's interesting, and I don't think anyone's really quite nailed the balance of whether you want that I know. I think they do. I think teams will take a punt on a rider with big numbers, knowing that it might never materialize into race results. And there's been plenty of them. I've ridden with a few guys. I rode with one in New Zealand who I had to do a 5-minute power test, and I was sort of knocking on the door of 500, and this guy after 2 minutes just rolls up next to me and goes, "Oh, do you mind if I'd quite like to test myself as well. Would it be rude if I pressed on?" And I was like looking at 500 on the power meter going like, "Oh, you do you, mate. Holy shit." And he just rode off, and it was astounding, but he struggled to race. I hope there's always a place for the racer as well. I hope the physiological masterpieces don't overtake the racer, because I think they will always. There's always a place for them. The ones that, and Cavendish being the original racer who in a lab hasn't got much to show of anything, a sprint, endurance, anything, but he's quite good.
Will he break the Tour de France record?
Yeah, you wouldn't bet against him, would you? You'd be stupid to bet against Mark Cavendish.
Yeah, he's one of those such divisive characters. Like, cause so many of us loved Cav, and then I think that clip came out of him shouting as mechanic. Did you see that about a saddle height or something from the Tour 2 years ago? And I think he lost a lot of favour after that clip. So now I see quite a polarised online. Some people love him, some people hate him. I think that's why the story's so intriguing heading into the Tour, because you have one camp really rooting for him and another like utterly despise him.
Yeah, I'm a big Cav fan. I've spent a fair bit of time with him recently as he's sort of just trying to tick the last few boxes ahead of the Tour, just from an aero point of view. And it's, you spend enough time with someone, you realise why they're as good as they're good. He thinks about stuff. I'm like, like, wow, that's wild that's where your brain has been. I've never considered that aspect to pedaling a bike before. He's someone that's really thought outside the box. That's not been all just about numbers. It's like some of the stuff that he's thought about and probably takes for absolute granted, would be groundbreaking. And I hope it all, obviously after the talk, I'm sure he will talk about all the things he's thought about. Or I hope he doesn't. If he won't, I'm going to tell him I will have the conversations in the car, because it's really cool. So I hope he's chucking everything in the kitchen sink at it. And I said you'd be silly to bet against him.
Alex, you're a gent. Best of luck with the returns. You'll have to pop on again soon.
Thanks very much. Cheers, Anthony.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please click up here. There's another video I know that you're absolutely going to love. And click over here and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our amazing upcoming guests.